An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 2. The Dragon and the Bastard. I will not stand for this! Daenerys heard some kind of wooden trinket or case crash against the wall. To say that her brother took Lord Stark's arrival badly was an understatement. To allow one of the usurper's dogs into the same home as me, his rightful king! Yet another enraged yell left his throat, this time not joined by something shattering. Calm down, your grace, Illyrio cautioned, staying back and letting the prince let out his anger. His arrival here is but a coincidence, due to business dealings I have with one of his vassal lords. Viserys chuckled darkly. Do I look that I have two shits to give about your business, Illyrio? No. The effrontery of him to even grace his presence around me while still bending the knee for Robert the usurper is what angers me. And to bring a bastard into my presence. Dany's ears perked up at the even passing mention of the handsome young man accompanying Lord Stark. He's a bastard. Even though such distinctions were less imposing in Essos than her native land, it still surprised her that such a high nobleman would essentially treat a bastard in the same vein as a true-born child. Such spoke volumes about Eddard Stark, or this Jon Snow, as was the traditional northern bastard name, or perhaps both. For some reason, the young girl felt a need to defend him from her brother's insults. Viserys, it is not this young man's fault he was born a bastard. A strangled breath left Daenerys' lips as she was pressed into a wall, stone digging into her back while her brother's hand wrapped around her neck. Did I say you could talk, sweet sister? He hissed. Do not wake the dragon. With that, Viserys let go, causing her to crumple onto the floor. Sensing a need to calm the situation, Daenerys was no good to anyone severely injured. Illyrio jumped in. Do not worry, your grace. Lord Stark may be on the side of King Robert. Robert the usurper! I am the king. Do you understand? The merchant grit his teeth. Yes, forgive me. But while Lord Stark has his loyalty to the usurper, the people of the North still drink secret toasts to your name. He would be a fool to be anything but respectful of you. That Ned Stark always conducted himself with honour and respect, regardless of oaths and loyalty, could be left out, as was the North's hatred of the Targaryen name. This seemed to mollify the angry prince, who merely huffed. If that is the case, then I will tolerate his presence. But if he sullies my good name with that half-blood bastard, then things will be different. Viserys stormed off, Illyrio behind him. Curled up against the wall, one hand soothing her sore neck, Dany felt the tears that were threatening to fall. I am blood of the dragon, she whispered to herself. A dragon does not cry. It wasn't the first time Viserys abused her, nor would it be the last. Truth be told, this was mild compared to some of the enraged tantrums he had taken out on her. It is not a kindness, she thought quickly. A bruise would lessen my worth to the Dothraki, and lower his standing in front of the Starks. To not even allow herself to imagine her brother had any kind or loving feelings for her hurt Dany worse than any blow. But a lifetime on the run from assassins and poverty quickly killed any thought of harbouring denial. I am blood of the dragon. It was at this moment a voice reached her ear. A voice from outside. One that she had only heard once in the atrium just this morning. Standing on shaky feet, she made her way to the open window to see the handsome young man playing with a white pup. The bastard of Winterfell. Jon Snow. He looks so much better smiling. Dany couldn't help but think. However, something drew his gaze to where she stood, and for a second their eyes locked before she ducked back away from the window, a bright red blush adorning her pale cheeks. Sighing, Jon looked away from the now empty window, to where his direwolf sat, tail wagging. Well, Ghost, think a girl like that would ever think of me more than a bastard? Ghost cocked his head to one side, tongue swiping over his nose. That's what I thought. of all the far-fetched contingencies Ned Stark had imagined were waiting for him in Pentos. Seeing the 2 remaining children of the Mad King wasn't one of them. Robert was not going to like this if he found out. The King of the 7 Kingdoms trusted Ned with his life, but was irrational when it came to the Targaryens. I will have to stop by King's Landing on the way home, break the news personally of this visit. If Robert knew the whole story, then he was bound to understand. Ned knew it was only he who could have gotten away with it, though. Eyes catching a glimpse of the princess. She looks just like her mother. More beautiful, even. He still remembered Rhaella. Silver hair lustrous with the Targaryen graceful beauty on that fateful day. The grand tourney that had started everything. It was as if Ned saw a ghost. He would have to shove that aside. He was the mighty warrior of the North. No man worth his salt would insult a host's gracious invitation to a feast in his honour. Convincing Jon to let go of his emotions was a whole other story. "Father, do you know what they did to our family?" The 16-year-old hissed. The classic stubbornness of youth, along with a bull-headed nature clearly from his mother, it made Ned want to smile in fond recollection, but he bit it back. Now wasn't the time. "I will not treat with the Mad King's son." "Aye, our family suffered at the Mad King's hands," Ned conceded. The fact that Jon omitted the princess was not lost on him at all. "But that was the Mad King's doing. Viserys was but a child, and Daenerys was merely a bump in her mother's belly." Jon opened his mouth to protest, but when Ned placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Believe me, son, I hate the Mad King for what he did. But what did I teach you and Rob about judging a man's character?" Jon's face softened. "An honourable man always looks at what a person is, not what his family has done." It was the Stark way. Ned's way. He taught his children well. "I see your point, father. I will give the prince and princess my respect." Ned smiled at his son. "Good. I am proud of you, Jon." He eyed him over, truly taking in what a strapping young man Jon had become. The boy deserved more. It was his failure that he hadn't gotten it. "I couldn't ask for a better son." Unused to such praise, Jon merely smiled at his father. The smile turned into a nervous frown. "Father," he struggled with the boldness to ask what he had always died to know. "Tell me about my mother. Please." Of course he would ask. Jon would have been shocked if Jon had not. But he couldn't tell him. Not now. "He deserves to know something," a voice in his head cajoled. "It is too risky, even in these times." The Warden of the North settled on a compromise. "That is for another time, Jon. But I promise you, your mother loved you very much. More than anything in the world." It was the truth. She did love Jon. Watching tears start to form in Jon's eyes, Jon smacked him affectionately on the shoulders. "Now, come on, lad. A Stark is never late." Back to seeing ghosts, he couldn't help but think. It certainly felt different being at the centre of the attention. Given Lady Stark's disposition towards him, Jon usually spent any major feast or dinner out of the main hall. He'd eat in the kitchens, or Rob and Arya keeping him company when he was lucky, and spending the festivities letting out the anger and bitterness through training. Now, though, here he was, sitting right next to his father, at the head table, as merchant after merchant passed by to address the Warden of the North and the other honoured guests. Jon knew he occupied the most junior position, the far left edge, on the table, but he didn't care. It felt great to eat next to his beloved father, who at the moment had a fake reserved smile plastered on his face as a drunk merchant with terrible teeth began asking about the Battle of the Trident. Hearing a loud snort further down the table, Jon quickly understood why his father refused. Sitting to Illyrio's right was Viserys Targaryen, staring daggers at both him and Ned. Spotting him, the prince's face turned revolted and shifted away to talk to Illyrio, as if a bastard wasn't worth his time. It didn't bother Jon. He was used to it from Lady Stark, Sir Roderick, and to a lesser extent Sansa. To Viserys' right, a small figure of silver blonde hair leaned forward. Princess Daenerys. Remembering the incident with the balcony and what his father had told him right before the feast, Jon set what he figured was his warmest smile. Something he only reserved for Arya and his other siblings. To his credit, Daenerys responded with a smile of her own. Jon decided at that moment she looked best when she smiled. Though why it mattered to him did not cross his mind. "Lord Stark!" boomed another loud, rather boisterous, and clearly drunk merchant with a beard twice the length of Illyrio's. "What an honour it is to see the Wolf of the Trident himself!" Hoisting his mug in the air, a green look washed over him as his eyes bugged out, and he ran for a small antechamber in the corner of the hall. A smirk crossed Ned's face, and Jon snickered, faint retching sounds audible over the cacophony. "Is this what it's always like in the East?" Jon asked his father in a whisper. "No," Ned remarked. "Only the separate room. It is so partygoers can void their stomachs to keep celebrating." This statement made both burst into chuckles. "I knew plenty of feasts where a room like that would have helped King Robert." Chuckles turned into pure laughter. "Tell us about Dawn!" another shouted. "The man who defeated the Morning Swordsman single-handedly," announced another. At this, Jon's interest was piqued. He and Robb loved hearing about the story of their father battling Sir Arthur Dayne at the Tower of Joy, but had never heard it from his father personally. A loud smack was heard through the cavernous hall. "Of course," sneered Viserys, his speech slurred slightly from the fine Dornish wine. "The great Eddard Stark, renowned the world over for stabbing his king in the back." The whole hall grew quiet, even the drunkest among them knowing what was said. Ned's face turned to stone. Not a single emotion present. Jon, on the other hand, grew flush with anger. You do not know what in the seven hells you are talking about, my prince," he sneered. "Oh, but I do, bastard." The prince had a smug look on his face, coupled with a rather serpent-like grin. "When my ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, defeated the northern forces, Torrhen Stark swore fealty to him in perpetuity. For your undoubtedly feeble half-blood brain, that means that the Starks are forever sworn to the Targaryens. Your father is a vile traitor." Jon, even in his anger, could tell Daenerys was mortified at what was going on. Similarly, she hadn't had a drop to drink. "Brother, please, this is not—" A sharp crack echoed out, Dany's hand rushing up to clutch her face where Viserys had struck her. "Quiet, witch!" Dany's quiet pain made it clear that this wasn't a rare occurrence. In any case, Jon felt fire course through him. Lord Stark had raised honourable men, and no man worth his salt ever lay a hand on a woman. Robb had pounded Theon Greyjoy into a pulp 2 years before just for trying. This time, Jon was more diplomatic. Slightly. "If you raise a hand against your sister again, I will cut it off," he hissed, standing with his hand on the hilt of his sword. Daenerys stared at him with wide eyes, while her brother laughed. Jon could sense a small flash of fear, though. "Jon, that is enough. Sit down," he heard his father say evenly. Ned Stark's face was still stone, but his eyes were blazing. Sitting, Jon knew it wasn't directed at him. "My family, Prince Viserys, were loyal subjects of House Targaryen. However, when my brother and father pleaded with King Aerys about my sister, and he responded by burning one alive and strangling the other to death." The room was silent. Daenerys sat there with pure horror written across her face, the little colour her pale skin had draining away. The prince, by contrast, grew enraged. "Lies! Every word! My oath to him died on that day. I can tell, just by looking at you, that you share his honour." He stood, more accurately, the lack of it. Ned turned to his son. "Jon, we are leaving. I've lost my appetite." Glad to go, Jon followed his father out of the hall. He turned for one last look at the princess, who was close to tears at his father's story. Perhaps he had only misjudged one of the siblings. The knocking on the door disturbed Ned from his work. Quick reflexes prevented the ink bottle from spilling onto the grain manifests cluttering the intricate wooden desk. "One moment." He hoped it wasn't Illyrio or one of his servants, not needing the headache. Opening the door a creak, he was surprised to see a rather subdued Daenerys Targaryen. Not the person he would have imagined being at his door so late after dinner. But then again, nothing about this visit to Pentos was ordinary. "I am sorry to bother you, my lord, but may I have a few minutes of your time?" Though hard and sombre on most occasions, Ned Stark allowed her a soft smile. This girl was not like her brother, nor her father. More like her mother and brother, which was an eminently good thing in his opinion. "You are not bothering me, princess." He let her in, keeping the jaw slightly ajar. "One should rest his eyes often while writing. Please, sit down." He motioned to the bed while sitting in his chair. While she complied, the young Targaryen remained silent. Her cheek was red with a large handprint, something that made his blood boil. "My lady, please forgive me for my rudeness earlier." Biting her lip, after a few terse seconds, Dany mustered the courage to speak. "No, you weren't rude. My brother was—" She never criticized her brother, knowing what Viserys would do to her if he heard it. However, allies of the usurper they might be, the Starks were honourable men, and they didn't deserve what happened. "He was wrong. You two are fellow guests of our host, and deserve our respect." Ned smiled. Daenerys Targaryen had a good heart, unlike her father. While he felt she'd be a formidable ruler if given the chance, just a gut feeling, though a Stark gut was usually quite accurate. The humility and kindness precluded the Targaryen madness her father and brother had. "Thank you, my lady." Smiling softly at his noble air, Dany stood. "Do you know where your son is? I'd like to let him know as well." "I am not sure. I think he is outside." Nodding, Dany was about to leave when one last question popped into her head. One that nearly made her shake. "Lord Stark?" She watched Ned look at her with sincere eyes. "Was it true? About my father?" Honourable to the core, Ned couldn't lie to her. "Yes." Feeling physically sick, Dany fought the tears threatening to fall from her eyes, with all the fortitude of a dragon. "I am sorry. For everything." With that, she was gone. She found him exactly where Lord Stark had said, leaning on the railing, gazing out at the sea. Aside from the half moon, high above them, the only light was a flickering lantern on the far wall, casting a low illumination. Dany could tell that the young man was immersed in thought, handsome features imagining something far away from current reality. The revelation about her father had floored the princess, adding to the whirlwind her life had taken in a mere 12 hours. Sold to the Dothraki, and being the daughter of a monster. Viserys had berated her to not believe the lies. But at this point, Dany felt that Ned Stark was far more trustworthy. Her brother would have thought her a fool for her need to talk to the Lord's bastard as well. But she slowly approached him. Dany didn't know why, but she felt compelled to do so. Reaching out to brush his shoulder, out of nowhere he jumped and batted her hand away. Dany's eyes widened, fear spreading on her face. Jon had been staring out at the sea, not being able to get the silver-haired girl out of his mind. It wasn't the first time he had seen a pretty girl, far from it, but his self-loathing and fear of putting another Snow in the world usually won out. So why was this woman? That couldn't leave his thoughts. Must be the fact that she is a Targaryen. It wasn't every day that one came across the legendary dragon house. Growing up to stories of how evil and mad the family was, finding one so innocent only made it more surreal. It was therefore that he instinctually prepared to fight whoever disturbed him, only to find his stomach pain at seeing those waves of silver hair before him. "Princess!" He drew away, angry at himself for causing her much fear. "Forgive me." Blinking, Dany was taken aback by his piercing grey eyes, but that lasted but a second. "It is all right, my lord. I should be more careful sneaking up to a warrior next time." She couldn't help but smile sheepishly. "Aye, but you shouldn't call me that." He turned back to the sea. "I am not a lord. I am but a bastard of a lord." Catelyn's words still cut deeply from halfway around the world. He was nothing compared to the lowliest of the son of the lowliest lord, let alone a pure-blooded Targaryen. Dany bit her lip once more, not knowing what to say. This Jon Snow was an enigma, not much escaping the brooding, aloof exterior, but she could tell his status was a source of insecurity. She could relate, given her relationship with her brother. Looking at the sea, she decided to ignore it. "I'm sorry for what my brother said. Even a bastard deserves respect." "Perhaps, but you clearly do." His eyes were drawn to her cheek, the welt making him snarl. "I meant what I said about cutting off his hand." He looked her in the eyes for a moment, conveying his sincerity before shifting away. "Your brother is what I thought all Targaryens would be." Jon snorted. "No offense, princess." He sighed. "Your family and my father's family haven't had the best histories." "No, they have not." Gazing back at Jon Snow, Dany took in his features. The hardened yet boyish skin, the slightly long, wavy hair, determined jaw. He was handsome, no doubt, downright beautiful. He was still lost in thought. "What are you thinking about, Jon Snow?" "Home. The North." She was simply too kind, too innocent. It disarmed him. "Aye, Winterfell. It isn't much to the eye compared to somewhere like here, but I love it nonetheless." His lips curled into a wistful smile. Dany's heart fluttered at how much it brightened his face. "Spending time with my brothers and sisters and my father. There is nothing I love more." Dany could just imagine it, and felt happy that the enigmatic Jon Snow had some levity in his life. He was lucky to have siblings that loved him, unlike her. It was easy to talk to Ned Stark, the weathered lord, kind and welcoming, almost like the father figure she never had. Jon Snow, on the other hand, Daenerys simply... It felt right, as if he could relate to her. Maybe he does. "Must you have left a pretty girl behind?" Daenerys asked, curious. A small teasing impulse took her over for a moment. "Perhaps more than one?" A ghost of a grin crossed her face, only to disappear at his frown. "None." "Why not?" "I'm sure plenty would be interested." "In someone as beautiful as you," she didn't add. What drove Jon to trust her with his secrets was a mystery to him, but it felt right to do so. I don't want to create another bastard named Snow, and no woman would want to marry a bastard. An overwhelming sadness crossed over Dany, feeling for this boy more than anyone else she had ever encountered, including herself. Wordlessly, she raised a delicate palm and placed it on Jon's back, stroking softly, comfortingly. Not moving to push the hand off, Jon felt some of his pain flow away. Gazing down at the two from his second-floor window, Ned Stark sighed. On some level, he knew this would happen the moment he spotted the silver-haired princess. Though, by the old gods and the new, this was the last thing he wanted happening right now. Oh, Lyanna, he thought, wishing he could talk to his long-dead sister. What should I do? He heard nothing but the rustle of the equatorial wind. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. Love that. Jon and Dany having an almost magnetic attraction, but also like, it's so innocent right now. They're attracted to each other, yes, but they can tell that there is something there between them. I love that. Now, about the incest in this story. From the way I see it, the Targaryens are essentially the Ptolemies, and ancient Valyria was basically ancient Rome with dragons set amidst volcanoes that simultaneously erupted. In fiction, I myself have studied Greek mythology since I was very young. I'm not going to say how young, but I am aware of incest in fiction. Now, that's the only way I can handle it. If it's in reality in modern day, then it's gross to every single degree. But if it's historical, fictional like this, or mythological, then at least I can tolerate it as a plot point. As characters, I do ship Jon and Daenerys. If they weren't related, I would be much happier, but I can take it for Game of Thrones. If it was in every story I read, then no, just no. Anyway, I like how Ned is trying to be fatherly towards Dany, and how he raised Jon to be so honourable. We see it in spades in the show, of course, but defending the innocent little princess. Call me a sucker for the old cliches, but that's beautiful. And Dany slowly finding the bravery to apologise to Ned over something that happened before she was born. She is very timid right now, but like Ned thought in his mind, she is formidable. And despite how the show ended, I support Daenerys, always. I think she and Jon should have got married in the non-existent 8th season and had a child. I just wanted that to happen so badly, especially when Jon flippin' handed Dany a dragon baby skull in the dragon pit. Really? Anyway, I'm sorry, I've rambled on long enough in this video. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Remember to check me out on Twitter too. Bye!